Hey, just a heads up that the following content may be disturbing or triggering for some listeners and is not appropriate for children. Please take care of yourself and others who may be listening with you. Welcome to the Bonus Babies Podcast, a show that has no easy answers, only hard questions.
I remember just vividly being in the group home, seeing so many different outcomes of the other youth that I lived with. I saw people die. I saw people get addicted to drugs and fall victim to the streets. I saw other girls selling their body for money. I saw people just doing all types of crazy things at such a young age. And, statistically speaking, only 3% of foster youth graduate from college. And what I will say is that foster youth are some of the most bright, resilient individuals that I know. And I think if the resources are out there, there's no reason why that statistic shouldn't be higher.
Can you tell me what you call the kids who you've cared for over the years?
We feel that the children that we receive coming into our home are bonuses. So we call them bonus babies.
I love that. This is your host, Jayne Amelia Larson, and I'm a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate volunteer for youth in foster care. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful. In the same way a CASA works, I explore all things in the foster care maze by talking to kids, parents, caregivers, attorneys, social workers, therapists, really anybody and everybody who will speak to me to keep the conversation open and the information flowing about all things CASA.
Hi there, this is Jake Eberly, the producer of the Bonus Babies podcast, and this week, Jayne Amelia speaks with Jacqueline Robles, or Jackie, as she likes to be called. Jackie was in and out of foster care and group homes, but really, as she said, it was the best thing that happened to her, because her mother really couldn't care for her, and her father was out of the picture, and she realized that the best way out of all of this was to get an education so that she could get a job and take care of herself. And thanks to some really incredible CASA help and educational advisor help, she got there. Here's Jacqueline Robles.
Hello, I'm here with Jacqueline Robles. Hey, hi.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, hi. So I reached out to you via LinkedIn. I found you, you answered, and you said something like, how did you find me? And I don't know, you came up on my LinkedIn and that was it.
Yeah, I always ask because I randomly get several messages throughout the month from people probably seeing me as mutual friends in the space. And so that's why I just asked out of curiosity.
Great. So can you tell me who you are, where you're from? Tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Of course. My name is Jacqueline Robles. I often go by Jackie. I am 23 years old and I'll be turning 24 in a couple days. I live here in Los Angeles, born and raised. Right now, I am a full-time advisor for a national nonprofit organization. But prior to that, I am a proud product of the foster care system here in Los Angeles. So my road to being where I'm at today was definitely a long one.
Great. And so you said, very, very interesting, you are a proud product of the foster care system?
Yes. I say that I often say foster care is the best, worst thing that ever happened to me. A lot of people and a lot of peers that I know usually have bad experiences with foster care. I had a mixed experience with foster care, but I think foster care built me up to who I am and built the resilience and tenacity that I have today in my life and my adulthood. Of course, I went through crazy, horrible things, but I wouldn't change it.
Right. So you first went into care when you were 5 years old, right? You had two brothers, and what happened? How did you end up in care?
Yeah, so I first entered the Los Angeles foster care system when I was 5 years old. I have two older brothers. One of them is 5 and 6 years older than me, respectively. And we first went into care because, well, one, my father was always absent. So my mother was a single mother raising all of us. And eventually her mental health and addiction with methamphetamine got out of control, and slowly but surely we stopped going to school. She stopped providing for us, and so the school social workers were alerted, and all I remember was being taken away into foster care when I was 5. And during that time, My brothers and I were separated into two different homes. So my two brothers went to one home and I went to another.
And you had several placements before you ended up with your grandmother. Well, first of all, let me ask you, how do you feel about the word placement?
That's a good question. I think that word is used a lot in the foster care space. I do consider a placement, especially in terms of foster care, what you'll see is a lot of youth in foster care move from place to place. So I would feel weird calling it like home or a house. A lot of people, I would say, refer to their home or house to whoever and whatever makes them feel most at home. So that may not necessarily be their parents. That may be a foster parent or their aunt or whoever it is. So that word, I think, is used correctly in the space placement, just being somewhere you go to and from.
And did you understand what was happening? Do you remember how you felt?
I was 5 years old. Looking back now, I can look and be like, yeah, I remember what was happening. But did I comprehend it? Did I understand the severity of what was going on? No. I remember having a lot of mixed feelings. When you're young, when you're that young, it doesn't matter what your parents did or didn't do. At least let me speak for myself, you are conditioned, to always be around your parents, or, you love your parents no matter what. They're the perfect people in your eyes, probably the only people you know at that age. And so I didn't understand, but I definitely remember feeling really sad because I was wondering where's my mom and where are my brothers? I went from one day just going to school, living a semi-normal life, and then to the next being taken away into some random person's house, specifically this foster home. The foster mom didn't speak any English, and so there was a large language barrier between us. I speak a little bit of Spanish, but I'm not fluent, and so I remember my early memories of that, not being able to talk to her, and so that made it worse because I had no idea where I was at and I couldn't ask any questions.
Wow, so you were placed with someone that didn't speak the same language that you did.
No. And unfortunately, now looking back, I think it's a common practice in foster care. The system is stretched for placements and homes, and they'll put you wherever someone will take you. And oftentimes that's what happens, and sibling sets are not placed in the same home together.
Right, so eventually you were able to be reunited with your grandmother because she had to jump through a lot of hoops. Did you understand that, and did you know she was working to make that happen?
I don't remember her working towards that until the very end. I was in that foster home for about a year, and during that time, I didn't know this at the time, but my grandmother was jumping through all of DCFS's regulations of getting an appropriate home size, having these trainings, getting background check, fingerprinted, the whole 9 yards that they make family members go through to get custody of their kids or grandkids, in this case. And so it wasn't towards my sixth birthday is when I went back with my grandmother, and my grandmother is my mother's mother, who I'm referring to.
Right, and you were joined up with your brothers at that time?
Yeah, luckily we were able to all go with my grandmother, which was a challenge in itself, because in foster care, when you're trying to gain custody of a loved one, the regulations are so strict. And so, my grandmother, who just had her own son, went from having to have like a 1 bedroom apartment to a 3 bedroom house. And how do you know, do that in such a short amount of time, and making those kind of sacrifices with her own kids to take us in.
Right, so how did the adjustment go? Do you remember? Did it work out okay?
Yeah, I remember, I was 6 years old at that time, and I was really, really happy to not be in foster care. I just wanted to be with people that I knew. Being in foster care is the worst experience, especially for someone so young and not knowing anything and can't comprehend what's going on. So I was just really happy to be back with my brothers and back with my grandma.
But that didn't last, right? Because when you were 16, your grandma said, what?
Yeah, so I was able to live with my grandmother for 10 years. And during that time, like I said, my brothers are 5 and 6 years older than me. So during that time, my oldest brothers essentially aged out and they became adults, but I was still 16 and I was still under her care. And as all 16 years olds, we have a mind of our own. And, I wanted to go out with my friends and hang out with my high school friends. I was in high school at the time, and things started getting rough towards the end. I had a lot of attitude and behavioral issues. And at this point, my grandma was already due to be retired. And so, mind you, she could have been retired, but she kept on working to support us. And up until a certain point when I was 16, she ended up getting married and behind my back, getting married behind my back.
Behind your back, she got married. So there
Yeah.
was like a new guy in the picture.
Yes, it sounds crazy, but true story. I was going to school at the time, living with her when I was 16. I was sophomore in high school, and I got a text saying that she was married or she was getting married and that he was going to be moving in the next week, and I was so confused. And long story short, he ended up moving in. It was actually her son's, so my mom's brother's dad. My mom and my uncle, her two and only kids, have different fathers. So it wasn't my grandpa, it was my uncle's biological dad
I see.
that she hadn't been with for years. So then she finally married him, and they had plans to go to Oklahoma because that is where my tribe is. I'm Native American.
Oh,
I
that's
am from
right.
the
Oh,
Choctaw tribe.
thank you for reminding me. Thank you.
Yeah, so a lot of my extended family lived over there already. She was due for retirement. And, over there you get free healthcare, free employment. She could get a job. She could retire nicely there since, LA is so expensive to live here. Her pension would only go so far. So she ended up moving there. But right before she did, me and her husband got into a physical altercation, which actually was the reason why I got taken away again and went back into foster care. And so he put his hands on me. We got in an altercation. We were fighting, and the police were called, and
The whole thing, huh?
ultimately
Yeah.
the whole thing, they asked me, at this point it's different, right? I'm 16, I'm not 5 years old, so I understand what's going on. They asked me, do you want to stay here or do you want to go back into foster care? They gave me the choice, and I said I want to go back into foster care. And so I re-entered foster care again when I was 16.
Wow. So you didn't want to go with your grandma, and obviously you couldn't be in the same house as her new husband. So you decided to put yourself into foster care.
And I remember that day like it was yesterday. I actually had to go to the hospital. I remember having to take off all my clothes, and they had to, take pictures of my body because he had left bruises and marks, scratches from essentially fighting me. And they were, we were going to go to court. It was going to be a whole thing. And it was late that night. I went to the hospital. That took a couple hours. And after that, I went to an emergency shelter, and they actually don't have it anymore. I found out a couple years ago. It was an emergency shelter in downtown Los Angeles, and it was notorious for being really bad because it was underground of, I forgot, some building where, this is where all the kids went that didn't have a placement for the night. It was like 50 cot beds laid out and just a bunch of kids in foster care who
Wow.
didn't have a placement for the night. And so I was sent there, and I remember falling asleep. Well, let me rewind. When I got there, I remember feeling so invaded. I mean, they had me strip my clothes and put on their kind of like uniform, essentially, give them all my belongings, my phone, my wallet, all my stuff. They locked it up in a locker.
It's like prison. It sounds like prison.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
definitely was prison vibes. They don't have it anymore. I wonder why. And so that was I had my phone for the first time. I was 16, and they just snatched that away, locked everything up. They told me I would get it back when I left, and I'm like, when am I going to leave? And they're like, we don't know. Social worker is going to come tomorrow, so you'll figure it out. You'll find out. So I remember just being so exhausted from the adrenaline, from the altercation, to going to the hospital, to being, having to strip my clothes and have a random person take pictures of my body, and then coming to this and having to take off all my clothes again and put on, their uniform and give them all my belongings, and they locked it up. But I remember just feeling so exhausted and drained, and I remember just falling asleep. And I woke up like 6 in the morning. All the kids were awake. They were serving some kind of breakfast. And I was just like, my mindset was like to get out of there. I was like, I need to get out of here. So essentially, a social worker ended up coming, and they were like, yeah, we found a placement for you. It's up the road in Hollywood, California. It's a group home, but you can only stay there for 30 days. And then after that, we're going to have to find another place for you to go.
So when you agreed to go into foster care, there was no plan. You didn't have any idea, but did you imagine you were going to go to a family who would look after you? Was that in your head? But instead, this was totally unexpected. You're like, it sounds like you were in prison, and now you're going to a group home that's not even
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Interesting enough, at the time, I didn't know that the ICWA law in DCFS states that any foster youth that's Native American, it is a law for DCFS to try its best efforts to keep them with a Native family. I didn't know this at the time. Then I ended up finding that out, but then I didn't get placed with a Native family. I remember when the officer asked me, do you want to stay or do you want to go back into foster care? I picked foster care because in my head, any circumstance, foster care, whatever it was going to be better than my living situation now. And but I didn't foresee that it was going to be, a group home. I didn't even know group homes existed at the time. And I definitely didn't think it was a shelter. I didn't think, I was going to go to like some prison camp underground, this building. So I rolled the dice in that sense. But I just, to take it back, those 10 years living with my grandmother wasn't, I was initially happy when I was 6 years old, getting back um, placed with my grandma and someone that I knew. But my grandma really struggled. I mean, we grew up really poor. My grandma had to take care of her kid plus three. So she was a single mother, essentially, raising four of us. We really struggled, oftentimes lived in very small apartments. I didn't have new clothes every year or new shoes and I say that to say like things that maybe someone that wasn't in that situation would have. So we definitely grew up poor and struggled. And I remember when I was 16 and before I decided to go back into foster care, I was like, if I stay here and I graduate, I don't know how I'm going to be able to go to college because my grandma's not going to be able to pay for college. No one's going to be able to pay for college for me. And that's what I had seen happen to my brothers. My oldest brother had dropped out of high school, and my middle brother ended up going to the military because they had no guidance. No one in our family has gone to college or anyone that we could look up to for any kind of guidance of what happens after you turn 18. And so I say that because we did struggle during that time. It wasn't always rainbows and sunshine, but certainly going into a group home was much worse.
So how old were you when you found out what happened with your dad?
Yeah, so I was 16 years old. I stayed at that emergency shelter for 30 days. And after that 30 days, during that 30 days, they're essentially these social workers, lawyers are scrambling around to figure out, where are we going to place her next? And so they actually reached out to my middle brother, and he was in the military in Tennessee at the time. And they asked him if, I could live with him. And at the time he was 21 years old. And so, he said, yeah. And I flew out to Tennessee and I lived with him and his wife for 4 months. But during that time, they have a process within DCFS where they knew that my mom couldn't take care of me, but they have a whole department that finds parents of kids. And so they had tried to find where's her dad? Where's her father? Maybe we could find him and maybe he could take care of her. And that is when they found out that he was in prison and he was serving a life sentence. And they let me know that. And obviously he was in an option. And so that is when I found out, and I went to go live with my brother during that time. But that didn't last long. I lived there for 4 months. It was definitely a culture shock. I went to a school where I was the only, Latina there. It was predominantly just white students and Black students. And so I grew up in Los Angeles, where we're one of the most diverse cities in the U.S. And so I came running back because I'm like,
You
I
came
can't
running
live
back to
here.
the group home?
I came running back to the group home, and that was a fight. They don't want foster youth to be in group homes, but I liked my group home, and I liked my group home probably for all the wrong reasons because the staff there don't really care. They just kind of let you do whatever you want.
Yeah, they're not
You
paying
could just
attention. They're not really
yeah.
trained,
So you just
right?
you
It's
just
just,
live there. And that sounded like a dream to me when I was 16, because I wanted to do whatever I wanted and I wanted to hang out with my friends and just, I didn't want any kind of parental figure over me during that time.
so at that time, were you offered any services like mental health services, like therapy or anything like that when you're in the group home? Do you remember?
Yeah, they have a lot of services, I would say. Now, whether they're quality services or not would be another question. They have therapists, they have life skill groups, they have workforce specialists, education specialists. So they have different resources you can tap into. But what I will say about living in a group home, you're living with, at least I was living with like 15 other kids that are all between the ages of like 14 to 18. It's just like a madhouse. I
Yeah.
mean, like,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
imagine that. Imagine 15, 14 to 18-year-olds in one house. I mean, people are ditching school, people are doing drugs, people are selling their body, people are going to school. People are just leading all different types of things, especially all these other foster kids that carry different experiences and traumas.
Yeah, the reason why I asked about that is because you mentioned something to me on the telephone, and I don't know if you want to talk about that now, but did you have a chance to talk about that with anyone as a young adult?
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. I definitely skipped over this, but during my time when I lived with my grandmother, I was so I lived with my two brothers and I lived with my uncle, which was my grandmother's son. So it's four of us. And during that time, I was sexually abused by my oldest brother. I was about 9 to 10 years old, and I never told anyone. And so when I was 16 and I found out that my father was serving a life sentence, at that time I didn't find out why until I ended up doing a little Facebook digging and reaching out to one of my family, or actually, I think they reached out to me, one of my father's family members, and they ended up telling me that my dad was in prison for life. Well, essentially like 25 to 30 years. He'll probably die in prison. I don't know. Maybe he'll get out when he's like 70
Right, so long term. Yeah, long
something.
term.
Long term sentence. They ended up telling me that he went into prison for raping his stepdaughter, which is my half sister from another mother. Never met her. I don't know who she is. And so, when I found that out, I talked to my middle brother who I was living with at the time, and I told him because he didn't know. And I only found out because DCFS told me that my father was in prison, and then I did more digging and found out why, because they didn't tell me why. I don't even know if they knew why, or maybe they did but didn't tell me. And so, I shared that with my middle brother, and he was really shocked about it. But it wasn't until I was about 21 years old, I ended up telling my middle brother what my oldest brother did to me when I was younger.
And he had no
Because
idea at that time? He had no idea until
he
you
had
told
no
him?
idea. He had no idea. And
How about your grandmother? How about your grandmother? Did she know?
no, my grandma doesn't know. Actually, Jane, you're probably the fourth or fifth person that I've ever told, but I'm now at a point in my life, and I really wanted to talk about this publicly on this podcast. This is the first time I'm ever talking about this publicly. I mean, I thought I was going to take this to the grave, and like a lot of people, from my understanding, do. A lot of people will not tell anyone if they've been molested or sexually abused or raped or whatever it is, especially because it might be someone that you know, or a loved one, or whoever it is. And it's very common, actually, I would say, in foster care. A lot of foster parents are, caught doing those kind of things and go to jail. I know people off top of my head, I could tell you that this has happened to, within foster homes, and it's definitely an issue. And so this is the first time I wanted to talk about it publicly.
I want to thank you for that. You're a really brave young woman. I can see that it's hard for you to talk about, but I can see that's important to you to do it. So please continue.
Yes, thank you. I think it's super important. It took me a lot of years of therapy, a lot of thinking about it, a lot of healing within myself, and also talking to other people that have experienced the same thing about it. And actually, Jane, when you first reached out to me and I looked into Bonus Babies podcast, I saw the one young woman who talked about turning in her father for a similar situation, and I was really compelled to share what has happened to me, because I know they always say, like, you may know people that have been molested or raped or sexually abused, but you don't know people that have done it. And so obviously there's kind of like a culture of secrecy
Yep, there is.
amongst it.
There sure
And
is.
for me, some of my healing and what I would like to tell people is that secrecy for my brother that did that to me is a privilege and a power that he's not going to have over me ever again. And once I came to terms with that, this is why I decided to speak out about it, talk about it, share it with other people. I would have never in a million years thought I would have told my middle brother about it. But at that time, when I was 21 and I told him, and that was 2 years ago, I'm 23 years old, we kind of put two and two together. And my hypothesis is that my father molested my oldest brother,
Oh,
and my oldest brother molested me. And so I don't know the stat off the top of my head. There's more context why we came to that hypothesis, which I won't go into. But the stat shows, that most people who are perpetrators have been molested or sexually abused.
that's right. The victim, right, becomes the victimizer. It's
Mhm.
very common, unfortunately. Yeah.
And so that definitely was like crazy to find out, at 21. But that was, I would almost say, the catalyst of what fueled me to start talking about it and becoming more comfortable about it, because it did happen to me, and I'm sure other people that are listening, it may have happened to somebody out there. But whatever your healing process looks like, or whether you come to terms with that or not, I think being able to take back your power from it and not allowing people to have secrecy around it is something that I hope people listening could come to, if that applies and feels right to you.
Good on you, Jacqueline. Good on you, really. So, in spite of how much difficulty you had already been through in your young life, somehow you powered on and you put yourself through school and more school and more school and more school. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah. So, despite all this, I lived in the group home at 16 to 18. I ended up aging out of the group home at 18 years old. During that time, between 17 and 18, I was applying for colleges, four-year universities. I was applying for scholarships. I didn't know how I was going to get to college, but I knew I was going to get there somehow, some way. If there was a will, there was a way. I remember just vividly being in the group home, seeing so many different outcomes of the other youth that I lived with. I saw people die. I saw people get addicted to drugs and fall victim to the streets. I saw other girls selling their body for money. I saw people just doing all types of crazy things at such a young age. And, statistically speaking, only 3% of foster youth graduate from college. And what I will say is that foster youth are some of the most bright, resilient individuals that I know. And I think if the resources are out there, there's no reason why that statistic shouldn't be higher. So I knew I was going to go to college. I didn't know how, why. Luckily, I had an educational specialist named Armin, and he really spent a lot of hours. Stop.
All right, you all can hear her dog. What's your dog's name?
I have two dogs, Smokey and Blue.
Smokey and Blue. That's sweet.
Yes, they are a full-time job. They're a handful.
At that same time in the home, did you also have a casa then, or did that come later?
Yeah, so actually I did have a casa when I first entered into the group home, and dang, I should give her a shout out. Shame on me for not. I was assigned a casa worker when I was 16. I remember her coming to my group home, and I was, just angry at the world. Like, who's this new person trying to talk to me and ask me all these questions about my life? And, I don't want to talk to her. But she came and she introduced herself and she told me who she was. I was so confused because I didn't know what CASA was at the time. But she really helped me during that time as I was exploring colleges. She took me to some universities to go do tours, and that was really impactful for me because, the group home wasn't going to take me to any schools to see. So she did that on her own time, and I really got to have that taste of what my future could look like. I remember seeing all the college students on campus looking all mesmerized, like I could just reach it. If I could just get out of this group home, I could be here in this space. And so Armin, my educational specialist, really helped me with applying for colleges and scholarships. Towards my last couple months of my senior year, I ended up finding out I was accepted to California State University, Long Beach, which was really exciting. I remember being really proud because, one, it's not common for foster youth to go straight into four-year university, but I would say that I had doubters within my school, my counselors, and, just people saying, you should just go to a community college and whatever it was. But I was just super proud I was able to get accepted. But the thing was, I was going to get kicked out of my group home when I turned 18, which was my birthday's in April. And so I didn't graduate high school until June. So luckily they were able to let me stay until I graduated high school in June. But they were like, after June, you have to leave. Like, it's not even us. It's just like the program around them receiving their funding.
But you're about to go to school in September, and they
Yeah,
couldn't keep you
so
for
no, they don't care.
wow.
They don't care. So they couldn't, not they wouldn't. They probably would if they could, but they couldn't keep me until I went to school. Even though I had the college acceptance, I'm like literally gonna go in the fall. During that time period, it was like figure out somewhere to live. Like you're getting, kicked out of this house once you graduate high school. And so, luckily my CASA worker was able to work her magic and secure funding for me to enroll into Cal State Long Beach early.
I love
And
hearing
so I
this.
ended up
This is
living.
so cool. It's so good. Yay on
I ended
her.
up leaving the group home, yeah, and going into college essentially a semester early, and living in the dorm.
Okay, so you went right into so that summer you started college classes.
Yes.
And you were living on campus then.
Yeah, because I had to move, so then I could live in the dorm. That was the option, but you can only live in the dorm if you're a student. So I wasn't going to be a student until the fall. So they were like, well, you could live in the dorm, but you would need to enroll in classes if you want to stay here. And so, well, at first I'm like, how am I going to do this? I mean, classes for summer are so expensive. my 2 classes with the dorms was like $5,000 for a couple months. And so, I don't have $5,000. I probably have like $15 from my group home allowance at this time. And so my CASA worker was able to go to CASA, and they have special funds for, special circumstances like this, and somehow work her magic and come back and get the funding to put me into school and secure a dorm for me to live in. And so that's what happened. I graduated high school. Maybe a week later, I packed up all my stuff from the group home and I got dropped off at the college dorm. And they just, dropped my stuff off and they were like, bye. And I just remember feeling in that moment like, this is the end of an era and I'm going into a new chapter of my life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And this is Casa of Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
This is fantastic. This is why we need more Casas, because there's
Yes.
kids out there like you that need services, they need attention, they need direction, they need guidance, they need support, and there are not enough Casas. So
I'm definitely a big advocate for CASA. I've done a lot of work with them throughout the years. Without my CASA worker, and we talk to this day. I don't even know what I would do. Like, I could not tell you what I would have done. And not only that, when I went into the dorm, I had like a sheet and a blanket to my name and kind of just my belongings from the group home. She created a registry for me and ensured that I had everything I needed for the dorm. So, from everything from like a shower caddy to a planner to like a whole comforter set, everything paid for.
wow, that's excellent. Yeah, that's really nice. And that meant that you could also choose the things, right?
Yeah,
So it was like for you by you, right?
yeah, I remember. It's so funny. She sent me the link to the registry. I had no idea she was going to do this. And then she told me, put whatever you want on the registry, pick whatever you want. And I'm like, who's going to buy, who's going to pay for this stuff? Like, are you going to buy this stuff? And she's like, oh no, I'm not going to buy it. And, she bought me one thing, but I remember putting this stuff on the registry, and I sent her the link back, and she called me and she's like, Jackie, more stuff, whatever you want, whatever you want. And I look back and it's so funny, but like, people in foster care, I'm sure, can relate, just always having a scarcity mindset, or like I couldn't get more. I just, kind of pick my basic needs, like, the cheapest sheet set, the cheapest comforter. I remember her telling me, like, you're going to need shower sandals, you're going to need a shower caddy, you're going to need all these things. And I'm like, really? Like, and she already had put 2 of her own kids through college. And so she had that experience of, what a college student would need to, go to school and stuff like that. So, I went back and I went to town and I added all these things, and she sent it to all of her amazing friends and I think like church community and just a bunch of different people, and people pitched in, and all these random people just bought all these things for me.
Yeah, that's really good. There were constant challenges for you about how are you going to pay for school? Where are you going to stay? Where are you going to stay on holidays? All that stuff. Can you talk to me about the Brody Foundation phone call?
Yeah, so that definitely, going through all of that. That was just the first challenge. I secured my housing, I secured my classes, and I went through the classes, and I remember like introducing myself and in the classes, and I'm so young. I'm like 18 years old, and these people in my classes are in their 20s, and especially summer classes. Summer classes are a little different. Non-traditional students are there, etc. And so I ended up, knowing that my state aid was going to cut off when I was 21 years old. But I was in college to get a 4-year degree, right? So that would put me at 22. So I just remember feeling like in a rush. I had like this big clock above my head, like, Jackie, you need to hurry up before your state funding runs out. I was like, where am I going to live in the summer? Where am I going to live during the holidays? Because in the dorm, they kick everyone out during Thanksgiving, during Christmas time. Or you could choose to stay, but that's an additional $1,000 to $2,000 to stay. I didn't have that money. I was like, how am I going to pay for my dorms? My CASA was able to secure funding for me for, one semester, but it was like, okay, I'm going to enroll in fall in a couple months. So how am I going to pay for that? And so luckily, I was able to get some, financial aid. I was able to cover some of my tuition. Some of those scholarships that we had, started like a year prior started pouring in randomly, getting emails like, congratulations, you have been accepted for the scholarship. And so all those little bits of money through those scholarships, I was able to like scrap it together and pay for my dorms. And I ended up going and enrolling in the Guardian Scholars program at Cal State Long Beach, which is a great program for foster youth.
Great program. Really great program. Yep.
And Cal State Long Beach is really, really great. And they were able to pay for my housing during the holidays and for summer housing. That was their commitment. And so they paid for my textbooks, little things like that. They provided food during the holidays because that's the other thing. The dining hall closes, so you don't have any food. You could pay to stay there, but you need to, and there's no kitchen at Cal State Long Beach. So you're kind of stuck to eating like a cup of noodles or,
Right. So
things
I want people to really understand this, that here you are completely on your own, trying to figure out where you're going to stay, how are you going to study, how are you going to get textbooks, how are you just going to live to make it through school to get on to like another part of your life. So this is like, I mean, the pressure must have been immense.
I agree, Jane. I want people listening to really understand where I'm coming from. I talk about it so leisurely now, but looking back, I'm in a constant like hustle mode, a constant survivor mode, just trying to get over each barrier one at a time. And it's just like this never ending challenges, barriers. If it's not something, it's another thing. And so really just I'm out there alone. I remember the day that it was like college admit day where everyone moves into the dorms, right? But I had moved in early, like a few months early. But a few months later, all these people move in, and I remember seeing, all these people pull up with their parents, dropping them off. That's what happens in college. Your parents drop you off, bring all your things in. And no, like I was over here just really just struggling and just trying to survive. I mean, it sounds all, I talk about it so leisurely, I think, but really it's just like a fight for survival, not only now exiting the group home and living, imagine living in a group home with like 15 other kids and then going into this real world of college, of higher education with a bunch of different students and different people that have various different backgrounds, ages, experiences. And so it really was a fight for my life, I feel like, during that time. But I just, one thing about me is I'm really tenacious. And so if I set my mind on something, I'll do it. And I just knew like I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna graduate college. I'm gonna be the first one in my family to graduate college. I don't know how. I don't know if I have to live in my car.
Wow, so excellent.
First one in my family. I don't know how. I don't know how I'm going to, like make it out of here, but I am. And so I pushed myself, and every semester I took a full load. I worked and I took 6 classes a semester, which is a lot.
A lot of classes.
If you don't know what that means, it's a lot of classes. I went to school year round. Most students go to school, fall and spring. So like 80-70% of the year, and they take summers off. I was in the local community college at Long Beach City College, enrolling myself into other classes to get ahead. I mean, I had this ticking clock, 3 years, and the state funding was going to get cut off, which is another topic for another day, but I think that is nearly not enough funding or assistance for kids exiting out of foster care.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I remember talking to a counselor, and the counselor like almost discouraging me, actually. It's not almost, was discouraging me. Like, most students don't take this many classes. If you're a freshman, you probably shouldn't take this many classes. You should start slow. And I'm like, you don't understand, lady. You don't know what you're talking about. I need to get out of here. I need to graduate. And I remember feeling like, she doesn't understand my situation. Like I need to get out of here. I don't have another year to afford. And so
yeah, she just didn't get it. It's,
and I would say that's definitely the mentality at least during my time at school. was like, take as many as you can handle, take as many classes as you can handle. Don't overload yourself. You have all the time in the world. I don't. I don't have the support of my family. I don't have family to go during the holidays. I don't have family to go during the weekends where people leave campus to go back with their families. I don't have financial support from my family. All these things I don't have. And so it's really just me, myself, and I. And so I remember just like leaving that counselor's office. I'm like, screw this. I'm going to have to do it myself. I remember logging on to Cal State Long Beach's website and figuring out, okay, what classes do I need to take in advance so I could finish a year early? And I remember mapping it out, doing it for myself. And I mean, yeah, so I took a full load year round. And when I turned 21 years old, I was eligible to graduate. And I remember the day that I got the email saying that I could apply to graduate. I remember just like, oh my God, like this is it. This is what I've worked for these past years. Because, when you're in college, you're going through these motions, you're just going to class, you're doing the assignments, you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. At least I didn't, speaking for myself. And I just knew like, okay, I just need to keep on doing this, keep a steady pace, keep taking these classes, keep trying to scrap this money together, pay for my housing, pay for my classes, and keep on going, keep it pushing. And actually my last year, my senior year of college, not only was my state aid going to run out, but I was going to have nowhere to live again.
Yep.
Because, I'm graduating, the state aid cuts off. And so during this time, I was living in a transitional housing program. So my last year, I lived in a transitional housing. My first 2 years of college, I lived in the dorms. And my last year, I was going to get kicked out because I was turning 21. And just like the group home, they have their age limits. At 21, you get kicked out. And so I remember same kind of situation. Graduation was in May and my 21st birthday was in April. And it's just so crazy. Like ages, as an aside, ages in foster care is so arbitrary because, had my birthday been in December, I could have stayed like
Yeah,
the
it
whole
would have
rest
been
of the
totally
year.
different for you, right?
And so it's so dumb in my
Right,
opinion.
but in spite of all that, you graduated, and then you end up in graduate school.
Yes. So
wow.
During my senior year, not only was I figuring out, my housing situation, I was also applying to graduate school at the same time. And again, I don't know anyone that went to graduate school. I didn't know how I was going to get to graduate school. And graduate school, applying for graduate school is a different process than undergrad. And you need letter of recommendations. You need to pay for application fees. You need to write essays. Like it's definitely more professional and like that next level up to get in. And I wanted to go to school for public policy. I got my bachelor's degree in business management. I didn't want to go pursue an MBA because I wanted, in my head, after experiencing all these things, I'm like, I want to go make a difference in people's lives. I want to go affect policies, laws, legislation that will impact communities that I come from and that will help people that come after me because I know it's possible. I did it. I like to say that foster care is the best, worst thing that has ever happened
The
to me.
best, worst thing
that has ever happened to me. And I say that to say that if I was able to attain this, then there's no other reason why other kids in foster care can't too. So I was applying for graduate school. Same kind of situation. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know where I was going to live. Graduate school is a different monster. Like I said, tuition for graduate school is $30,000 a year compared to Cal State Long Beach was $6,000. So we're talking about 5 times. Have to go 2 years to finish the degree. So that's $60,000. That's not including the cost of living in LA. And so I applied to 3 different schools. I applied to Cal State Long Beach, I applied to USC, and I applied to UCLA. I got accepted to all 3 of them.
Yes, you did. I know you did.
And UCLA, actually USC offered me the most amount of aid, but USC's tuition is just like astronomical, which is a different podcast for another day.
Yeah,
but
super expensive. Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to go to grad school. I don't care if I have to take out loans because at the end of the day, I'm going to bet on myself every time. And so I I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, I don't have this money. I'm just going to have to take out loans. So I was like, if I'm going to have to take out loans, I'm going to go to UCLA. That was my number one choice of graduate school. And I'm going to go. They have a really good public policy program. And I was just like, I'm going to figure it out. I always do. And so I remember during that summer in between undergrad and going into graduate school, I was working a full-time job actually at Children's Law Center. I worked at Children's Law
Very
Center.
cool. Very cool.
And I was a peer advocate, and I helped other transitional age youth go to school, get a job, get housing, all the things. But for them,
Really just do what you just did. Right. And you just did it like a month ago. Right.
yes. And I
Right.
remember, talking to my clients. They were my clients, like 20 of them. They're like, how old are you, Miss Jackie? I'm like, probably a couple months older than you.
Right. That's
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
some of them were older than me, but I just like, I felt very valuable in the role where I'm like, I just did this. So I can tell you exactly what you need to do, how to help you, provide you the resources. But I knew that that job wouldn't last forever because I knew that graduate school for my program was going to be essentially a full-time job. I started graduate school in October, and during that time was summer. And I remember, fully thinking I was going to have to take $30,000 to pay my tuition because graduate school doesn't come with any kind of financial aid or state aid that undergrad does. And I remember getting a call. I was at work. Actually, I was working remotely. This is the thick of the pandemic, right? So everyone's home. Everyone's scared of COVID. It's thick of the pandemic. And I remember getting a call from my case manager at my transitional housing program that I lived in when I was a senior in undergrad. And she calls me, and I'm like, that's weird. I haven't talked to her in a couple months. Answer the call. I'm like, hey, Alyssa. Like, she's like, how are you doing, Jackie? I'm like, I'm good. I'm just working. And we caught up a little bit. And she's like, well, I was calling because I wanted to let you know that we talked to the Brody Foundation. And I'm like, who? The who? And, it's a foundation that they're connected with. We shared a little bit about how you lived in the transitional housing, how you just graduated, and how you're going to graduate school. And they offered to pay your first year tuition.
The whole first year.
The whole $30,000.
Wow.
And I remember I'm getting teary-eyed thinking about it because I remember like my heart just dropping and physically feeling like a weight come off of me. Like, oh my God, this is like life changing money. And the fact that people are out there, again, people are so kind. There's good people out there. I have faith that there's good people out there. I had my CASA worker help me with all my necessities getting into undergrad, and someone that I don't even know. And just to give a little context, I ended up finding out the Brody Foundation is a foundation that was founded by a woman who was married to one of the first Black judges in LA County Superior Court, and he ended up passing away, and she founded a foundation for him in honor of him and to financially assist people that are trying to attain higher education who need help. So someone like me in my situation where I wasn't going to have the money, my parents didn't set up a trust fund for me or something like that where I could tap into some kind of money. And so, yeah, I got that phone call.
Right. And it was no strings attached.
No strings
right?
attached.
It was just like, here is the money to help make it happen for you.
I got an email the next day from Alyssa that said, send me the address. They're going to write a check. They're going to send it to the school. Like, just send me the address where the check needs to go. And
Wow.
I sent the address, UCLA's address. They sent a $30,000 check to the school, and they paid for my first year of graduate school.
Right. So please tell me, so what are you doing now? Because you're just a hot shot. But anyway, tell me about what you're doing now.
So yeah, right now I am an advisor for, I won't name the organization, but a national nonprofit that's focused on advancing economies for historically marginalized populations. And what I mean by that is I'm working right now, I'm working in different communities that have historically been marginalized or historically been excluded out of the picture of attaining any kind of success. So I'm helping community members in entrepreneurship, starting their own business, cultivating living wage jobs, writing reports, recommendations from these things, from talking to different community members, from meeting with different legislators, different higher ups, different community organizations, compiling all this kind of information, and writing those reports, and hopefully, making those changes. So that's what I'm doing now. I just started, it's been about a couple months.
So you're doing what you said you wanted to do, which
Yes.
is you're making an impact, and you are making people's
Yes.
lives better.
I hope so. And on the side, so that's my full-time job. My other full-time job is a full-time dog mom to my dogs. But the other job that I have that I do on the side is I also, I'm a consultant, mentor, advocate for kids in foster care. That's what I do on the side. I am planning to become a CASA.
Yay!
I just need to,
You'd be
I
great,
need to
Casa.
free up some space on my plate, as I like to say, because I've been stretched thin very recently, because I'm also in the process of buying a home, my first home. And so
you're going to have your own house too? Wow.
Well, fingers crossed. I'm in the process. It's happening. And so probably by the end of the year, I will be a homeowner, which is,
Amazing.
my family never lived in a home. We never owned a home. And that's just like the first step I want to take into creating generational wealth for my future and my kids. Well, I don't have kids yet, but hopefully generations down the line. So that's what I'm doing now in my full-time job. And on the side, I do, policy work for foster youth. I've gone last year, I went to Washington, D.C. and spoke to legislators there. I've gone to Sacramento several times. You could catch me in the imprint news and fostering media connections.
I think that's how I first learned of you. I think that's how I first learned of you, from one of the articles that you wrote for them.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to link to that in the show notes so that people can read that. And I will also link to the Brody Foundation, because that's a really special organization. And my hat's off to them too. So, okay, I have one more question. So what's happening in your romantic life? What's going on though?
Great question, Jayne. Thank you so much for asking. This is exclusive information that you'll only hear on this podcast, because I definitely don't share this outside of it. So I just got married early this year.
You're married?
January 17th.
You're married?
I'm married.
Wow.
Very young. But I'm actually married to a boy or young adult who I met in the group home that I was living in when I was 16. And we started off as friends. I had no romantic interest in him. And he just became my best friend while I was there in the group home. And, we stayed in contact after I left. He's like months younger than me. And so I went to college, and he went off to, he's in college now. And so we ended up staying connected throughout my undergrad, and he's been by my side since for the past, I'm turning 24. We ended up dating when I was 16. We were 16. So how many years is that? 8? 8 years. Well, coming up on 8 years. And so we recently got married this year.
So you're newlywed too. Wow. So you're not just a dog mom or mom dog, whatever you said, right?
I'm a wife too.
You're a wife. Wow.
Yes. Well, and we are buying our first home together.
Oh, that's so good. That's so great. I'm really happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to ask you one other question that I ask all my guests, and if you can dig deep for this, and I know you can. What is the one thing that no one would ever know about you unless you told them?
One thing when I first started all of this kind of work and just going into school, I would say I was very insecure in what I was doing, and I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like an imposter. I still do at my age. I'm in rooms. Well, I'm the youngest. I was the youngest person in graduate school. I was the youngest person in my organization today. And I constantly feel like I don't belong in spaces. But now, like as I'm growing up and thinking about the kind of impact that I can have if I embrace those spaces, has really helped me grow out of that and become more confident in myself and who I am. I shared all these things right now with you, all my challenges, barriers, but I would say that I'm a very, I mean, if you ask people around me, I'm a very private person. So people wouldn't know anything about this, about me going to graduate school, any of this stuff, unless they know me. So I would just say one thing is that I was very insecure when I first started, and I felt like I didn't belong, and I had severe imposter syndrome in these different spaces. And I was very ashamed of being in foster care. I mean, no one growing up knew that about me, knew my circumstances. And now, as I've grown up, it's something I've learned to embrace, something I've learned that could be almost like my superpower in the spaces that I am now.
It's a superpower, Jackie. It is.
Yes.
I mean, you're just a powerhouse, really. You just, I appreciate what you've been through and what you're doing and what you will do for others and for yourself. It's pretty awesome, Jackie. It really is. I think when people hear this, they're going to be so inspired.
Thank you. I hope so. I mean, and one thing that I would say to anyone listening out there, any foster youth or anybody, well, two things. Leave it with that. One thing for foster youth, any foster youth listening, you can do anything you want. You can do anything you want in this lifetime. Don't let anyone tell you anything. If someone tells you no, you're asking the wrong person. And for any providers or people that interact with foster youth, I would say, remember that these foster youth that you interact with, these are their lives. These are their real lives. They are not bad people. They've gone through bad things. And at the end of the day, remember why your heart's in this work. And, this work can get really exhausting and draining, and you can get burnt out and et cetera, but these are real people's lives at the end of the day. And just remember why you're in this work to begin with.
Thank you, Jackie. That's really great. Thank you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jackie, for having the courage to tell your story, and you're helping others learn to step up and speak for themselves. You're really an inspiration for everyone, and we're honored that listening to the Bonus Babies podcast helped you tell your story. That just affirms for us that what we're doing is working. So, again, thank you, and congratulations. Our next guest is Dr. Noah Nash. He spent the early part of his life in foster care, and now he's an educator and creative web designer and developer, amplifying stories, products, and projects with people, for people. His portfolio includes work in international children's rights, emerging technologies, social impact, and philanthropy. Noah's ethos is empowering more people to mindfully leverage technology en route to materializing the world we wish to see. It's pretty incredible. So join us next week for Noah Nash. If you see something, say something. If you suspect a child's health or safety is jeopardized in any way by parents or anyone else, contact the Child Protective Services Agency in your county. 24-hour hotlines are staffed by trained social workers who will help you through the process, and you can do so anonymously. In California, you can call the Child Protection Hotline at 800-540-4000. So if you see something, say something. You might be saving a child's life. If you want to know more about becoming a CASA anywhere in the country, go to nationalcasagal.org, and in LA, casala.org. And if you want to know more about becoming a foster parent, check out the National Foster Parent Association at nfponline.org. There's also faithfosterfamilies.org and adoptuskids.org. There's tons of other information online as well, so you can just hunt around. We also want to thank the supremely talented Christina Apostolopoulos for her beautiful original music. You can find her music on Spotify or Instagram at Christina Aposta. And also thank you to Yukon Har for his engineering. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear and you find it as valuable as we do, please rate us and hit subscribe. You can also make a donation at bonusbabies.org. See you next time.